Hello, my name is Colonel Alexander, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit tonight about the Iraq War. So, back in about 2003, March of 2003, our president came on the television, President George W. Bush, came on the teleprompter, ABC, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all of them. All eyes were on him that night. He was basically getting on the teleprompter to justify the reasoning for our country entering Iraq that same night. He came across the teleprompter and basically stated that as Commander-in-Chief, he ordered his troops, military, Army, Marines, Air Force, to enter Iraq. These were some of the reasons that he gave. One reason was to disarm Iraq. His second reason was to free its people. His third reason was to defend the world from grave danger. In a speech the president gave that night, I quote a few words of his. "The United States will not live at the mercy of an outlaw that threatens the peace with weapons of mass destruction." This information was pulled from Time Magazine's article, 7 Years in Iraq, written by Joe Redesy. If you want, go to www.timemagazine.com/7 years in Iraq. Boom, this information will pop up. So let's backtrack a little bit. General Colin Powell, a month before that, in February 2003, went before the UN and basically pleaded his case for Iraq. And I quote, "My purpose here today is to inform you on additional information of Iraq's involvement in terrorism and their weapons of mass destruction, which was also a part of the inquiry that the UN put on by the name of Resolution 1441. This information was pulled from transcripts from General Colin Powell's speech. You can pull that off of the World News Guardian, www.guardian.co.uk. It's the World News Guardian /full text of Colin Powell's UN speech. And you'll see that excerpt that I just talked about. So now we'll go to President Bush's address to the United Nations, which happened a couple weeks after General Colin Powell's speech to the United Nations. And I quote, President Bush stated, "If the Iraq regime wishes peace, it will immediately remove and destroy all weapons of mass destruction and long-range missiles." This information was pulled from the text of President Bush's speech to the United Nations, which can be found on cbsnews.com/President Bush Iraq speech to the United Nations. So let's go to 2002. In 2002, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 1441. Resolution 1441, which called for the cooperation of Iraq with the UN inspectors to come into their country and verify if Iraq had any weapons of mass destruction, any cruise missiles, any terrorist training sites, anything and everything that the United States claims that they had, the United Nations wanted to go in there and dig up. On all accounts, some U.S. officials basically had to bite their tongues. They had to bring back a lot of the information that we were putting out there. Nothing was found in Iraq at that point in time when the Resolution 1441 was passed and the United Nations inspectors went into the country. Nothing was found at that point in time. A lot of U.S. officials also accused Iraqi President Saddam Hussein of harboring Al-Qaeda terrorists, training them, allowing them to open up terrorist boot camps in his country. At that point in time, when the United Nations went in under this resolution, nothing was found. Iraq President Saddam Hussein stated he was never harboring any Al-Qaeda, and the United Nations had no evidence of that when they entered this country. This information was found on Wikipedia under Iraqi War in Wikipedia under paragraph 1. So in January of 2004, we had an individual by the name of David Kay. He was the leader of an Iraqi survey group, which was basically deemed, hey, go in there and find us weapons of mass destruction. The United Nations, when they went in there, their Security Council under the Resolution 1441 in 2002, they couldn't find anything. So we send in another inspection team in 2004, led by an individual by the name of David Kay. He was the leader of that survey group. Okay, Mr. Kay, and I quote, states, "I don't think they ever existed. I don't think there was any large-scale production of weapons of mass destruction, and the programs ended back in the 1990s, and there hasn't been any active program since." This was when Mr. Kay entered their country in January 2004. He stated he didn't even think this actually was ever happening since the 1990s. Mr. Kay actually stepped down from that position because he felt strongly about the findings of him finding nothing. He stated he didn't want to be a part of the regime, part of the inspection committees. He didn't want to be a part of anything that had to do with going into that country. And this was in January of 2004. That information was taken from Time Magazine's also article, 7 Years in Iraq. And you can look under the year of 2004, and you'll be able to find that information there on Mr. Kay. Mr. Kay briefed this information to a Senate committee. He was called before the Senate, and he briefed the information that he never saw anything, he never thought anything was happening. He thought production had ended in 2000, and back in the 1990s, he thought production had ended. So I'll kind of end with this. I'll end with a question. Do we feel as an American people that back in March of 2003, the information given to the American people came across as breaking news? United States entering Iraq, the speech that was given by our president stating the United States will not live at the mercy of an outlaw and that threatens the peace with weapons of mass destruction. This was a direct quote from President Bush back in 2003. Do we feel as a country that we were lied to when it comes to the Iraq war? Do we feel like the president wasn't all the way truthful on the reasonings of why we entered that country? Why we killed their leader? Why there are no weapons of mass destruction ever found, and there were no terrorist sites ever found in that country? They weren't training any terrorists, had nothing to do with September 11th, 2001. So what was our reason? Something to think about.